Okay, folks, this is part 2, number 2 on the Unit 3 performance task. All right, now in this one it says use diagram and the given information to answer the questions and prove the statement. So it's given that angle X is congruent to angle Z, and it is marked already for us. See the little arc there? Equal number of arcs, they each have one arc. That means those angles are congruent. It also says that segment XY is congruent to ZY, and that's marked congruent. It's asking you to prove that AZ is congruent to BX. So this is ultimately what we're trying to prove right here. AZ congruent to BX. Okay, so that's our goal. All right, now I'm going to scroll down and we're going to start on the first question. So with that said, it says, redraw the diagram of the overlapping triangles so the triangles are separated. The only thing you're going to change is that the left and the right triangle will be separated. Everything else has to be the same. That means you have to label the triangles X, Y, Z and Z, A, Y. You have to label YZ congruent to YX. You have to make sure you don't change anything except separating the two triangles. All right. Now it says, what additional information would be necessary to prove that the two triangles XVY and ZAY are congruent? Which congruency theorem would be applied? Now, with that being said, if I draw the left triangle, and then I draw the right triangle, not exactly perfect, but most things aren't. All right. That's ugly. I'll have to redo that. That's not good enough. All right. I don't like it. Let me redo it. So I'm redrawing triangle ZAY. Okay, a little bit better, right? Okay, so now I'm just going to label my vertices. Remember, you need to make sure you don't change anything. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I mark angle Z with one arc. I'm thinking YZ has a mark on it, so I'm going to make a mark there. All right, now I'm going to label the left triangle X, and then Y at the lower left corner there, and then Z. All right, I'm not going to forget to mark angle X congruent to angle Z and segment XY congruent to ZY. Okay, so that's what they're asking you to do in this diagram. Now let's talk about it. We know the next question asks what additional information would be needed to prove these two triangles congruent. And I just want to go over with you again. We prove triangles congruent by side, 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 angle, side, angle, side angle, and HL. All right, so what it's asking is, if you wanted to prove the triangle's congruent by any one of these methods, could you do it? Just with one additional piece of information. So let's talk about, can we prove these triangles side, side, side? Well, we only have one pair of sides congruent right now. XY is congruent to ZY. In order to prove the two triangles congruent by side, 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 we need two additional sides to be congruent, not just one additional side. So since we need two pieces, I think the question's just asking one additional piece of information. So since side, side, side requires two more pieces of information to prove the triangle's congruent, I'm going to eliminate that. Now, side, angle, side. Let's take a look. What sides could be congruent or would need to be congruent? So we have segment XY equal to ZY. We have angle X congruent to angle Z. So that's a pair of sides and an angle. Now we need another pair of sides. The angle A is included. See how the A is between the two sides. So if we want the angle X and Y to be the shared angle of two sides, well, we already know XY. What other side has to be marked congruent so these two triangles are congruent? So here and here. So you would say for question, this is for question 2, okay? You would say if segment XZ was congruent to segment ZA, then the triangles would be congruent by side, angle, side. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So we took care of side, angle, side. That's what we're trying to do here. Now, what if we wanted to show the triangles congruent by angle, side, angle? Okay, so angle, side, angle, we know X is congruent to Z. We know that, let me get rid of, I don't know that I can get rid of just these tick marks. There we go. That was for side, angle, side. We don't need that anymore. If I want to prove the triangle's congruent by angle, side, angle, you notice how the S is nested between the two angles. So that's a shared side of both angles. So we have one angle here, okay? We have this side. This side has to be shared with another angle. So this side, YX, shares a side with angle Y as well. Angle Y has a side of YX, right? And then angle Z has a side of YZ, but it also has a side of AZ, okay? So we would need to know that those two sides are congruent, okay? I'm sorry, we would need to know that angle, okay, let me start over again. Angle X is congruent to Z. It's angle, side, angle, so it's a shared side. So since angle Y also shares XY, and angle Y here also shares YZ, those two angles would have to be congruent by the reflexive property. So that would be another thing you would state, okay? So you would say angle Y is equal to angle Y. And then you would say by the reflexive property. And then the triangles would be congruent by angle, side, angle. Okay? So we took care of angle, side, angle. All right. We know it's not going to be hypotenuse leg because we don't know we have a right triangle. I know what you're thinking. It looks like angle Y is congruent to angle Y, and it looks like angle Y is a right angle. You were not told that. You cannot assume that. So we don't know that angle Y is a right angle. So it's not, hypotenuse leg is for a right triangle. The right triangles are the only triangles that have hypotenuses. So we don't have a right triangle. So the last thing we have to try to see what additional information is needed to prove the triangle's congruent by side angle angle. So we have, if you look here, we have a side, an angle, and we need another angle. The most immediate angle is Z. In this triangle on the right, we have side YZ, angle Z, and we need the next angle in that order, okay? If we said angle Y, it would still be angle side angle, because that side YZ is shared by both angles. When you have a shared side, it would be angle side angle. When the angles that are congruent don't share a side. So think about the congruent side. Angle A and angle Z share side AZ, but that's not the side that's marked congruent. So if we show that angle A is congruent to angles Z, we could show that the triangles are congruent by side angle, sorry. Okay? So you would add that third way to prove the triangle's congruent. So just remember, you would have to say that angle Z is congruent to angle A, and then say the triangles would be congruent by side angle angle. All right? So next, one last part. I do have to erase in order to scroll. All right, so that's B. Prove the triangles are congruent. Okay, so this one is going to be a little difficult when can't see the problem. But I'm going to do a 2-column proof, and I suggest you do one as well. There's a statement column, and there's a reason column. And I think we have 2 givens, right? So number 1, you're going to give me whatever is given, and your reason is going to be given. Statement 2, you're going to give me whatever is given, and the statement will be given, or the reason will be given. Now we're going to use one of the ways we can prove the triangle's congruent. And the only way we can actually do it based on the diagram is to show that angle Y, because it's shared by both triangles, angle Y is congruent to angle Y. And you can say that. The others you can't. Okay, you can't state that any of the additional information, any other additional sides or angles are congruent because they're not shared sides. The only shared angle is angle Y. And whenever a segment is congruent to itself, it's called the reflexive property. And the reason we're doing this, because we get a pair of angles. So far, if you recall, let me take that out. All right. It'll fit now. All right. So think about what we said. If angle Y was congruent to angle Y, we would have side angle angle. So you would say triangle, whatever that was called, blah, 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 is congruent to triangle blah, 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 whatever they're called. And the reason would be the side angle, as we stated earlier in the previous problem. Now, it asks for you to prove the very last statement is the proof statement. Okay, whatever it is. It's two segments. You have to prove two segments are congruent. So the reason is if two triangles are congruent, every pair of sides or segments are congruent, right? If you have a triangle and there's three pairs of angles, three pairs of sides, and the triangles are congruent, all three pairs of corresponding angles are congruent, all three pairs of corresponding sides are congruent. So we would say those segments, remember you're going to put in the proof statement in statement 5, are congruent by CPCTC. All right, and what that means is corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. The C stands for corresponding. The P stands for parts. Of. The next C stands for congruent. Congruent, the T stands for triangles. Are congruent. And that does it, folks. Have a good day.